Hello.
Hello.
We're gonna do
Welcome.
the thing again.
Welcome to week 3 of Pies and
Oh
Anarchy,
boy.
or the Conquest of Pies, or whatever you want to
Okay.
call it. We're doing Kropotkin and pie making. Let's get a count on where we're starting out, Claire. What's our money looking like?
Our money is sitting at 3.2 million, and I think we've been averaging 2 million a night, so I'm expecting 5.2 million by the end of tonight.
Hell yeah.
Uh which is almost enough to start the actual revolution, you know?
We're fucking doing it. It's so good. I'm so
Uh,
glad. Um Hell yeah. All
do you
right.
think we're gonna finish this book?
No, it's a
No?
long book. We're
How
on
many
chapter 5.
how many chapters are there?
Let me go check.
Yeah, check how many
Just
chapters
quickly.
there are.
There are 17 chapters.
Okay, that's fair. I think we'll get to chapter 10.
All right. Yeah, that seems right. That seems right to me. Just
I could just make more pies.
true enough. We can just make more pies. We can also take a break and maybe come back to it right before the end. Some last minute
Right.
conquest of pies
But
right
remember,
before.
we can
hmm
also make a little money for ourselves if
Well,
we
hang.
want.
That's not. That's not. No, hang on. Maybe we can have a little bit, just so that we can give it to people directly.
Well, I was gonna say so we can get better hair.
So we can get better hair.
Yeah, this
You
is
know
really
what?
what I wanted.
That's a
Yeah.
revolutionary need. That's a revolutionary need. Fair enough. Um, just a warning from the top that, first of all, my camera's off. I did not have time to eat before stream, so there will be a random break at one point when food arrives, and I
You will have to
will
suffer with me and only me.
and I will have to maybe be talking a little bit less just in the periods when between things. We're still gonna read as much as we can. I'll
We'll be
pace
making
myself.
pies just as much, and really we are here for the pies.
Yeah, we are here for the pies and revolution. So the
Yeah.
revolution might need some breaks, of course. But the pies are eternal. All
Eternal
right.
Pies, my favorite tabletop character of yours.
No one but you gets that reference.
A finger guns. I'm pretty
Um,
sure I've made that joke on the
I'm
podcast
sure you have.
before. It's yeah. Anyways,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm already 300,000. Oh wait, 30,000. I can do math. I'm already 30,000 up from where we were. So,
Fuck yeah, let's do
and
it.
then I fucked up as soon as I said that. So, great start. Give us some number 7. What's number 7?
As a reminder, we're on section 7 of Food, the chapter called Food.
The
We've been
long,
talking
long
about
chapter.
how food is made after the revolution and stuff like that. So section 7. All the great towns, we have said, buy their grain, their flour, and their meat, not only from the provinces, but also from abroad. Foreign countries send Paris spices, fish, and various dainties, besides immense quantities of corn and meat. But when the revolution comes, we must depend on foreign countries as little as possible. If Russian wheat, Italian or Indian rice, and Spanish or Hungarian wines abound in the markets of Western Europe, it is not that the countries which export them have a superabundance, or that such produce grows there of itself, like the dandelion in the meadow. In Russia, for instance, such a produce grows there. In Russia, for instance, the peasant works 16 hours a day and half starves from 3 to 6 months every year in order to export the grain with which he pays the landlord and the state. Today, the police appears in the Russian village as soon as the harvest is gathered in and sells the peasant's last horse and last cow for arrears of taxes and rent due to the landlord, unless the victim immolates himself of his own accord by selling the grain to the exporters. Usually, rather than part with his livestock at a disadvantage, he keeps only a 9 month supply of grain and sells the rest. Then, in order to sustain life until the next harvest, he mixes birch bark and tares with his flour for 3 months if it has been a good year, and for 6 if it has been bad. While in London, they are eating biscuits made of his wheat. But as soon as the revolution comes, the Russian peasant will keep bread enough for himself and his children. The Italian and Hungarian peasants will do the same. And the Hindu, let us hope, will profit by these good examples, and the farmers of America will hardly be able to cover all the deficit in grain which Europe will experience. So it will not do to count on their contributions of wheat and maize satisfying all the wants. Since all our middle class civilization is based on the exploitation of other races and countries with less advanced industrial systems, the revolution will confer a boon at the very outset by menacing that civilization and allowing the, I'm going to just read it as it is here, so called inferior races to free themselves. But this great benefit will manifest itself by a steady and marked diminution of the food supplies pouring into the great cities of Western Europe. It is difficult to predict the course of affairs in the provinces. On the one hand, the slave of the soil will take advantage of the revolution to straighten his bowed back. Instead of working 14 or 15 hours a day, as he does at present, he will be at liberty to work only half that time, which of course would have the effect of decreasing the production of the principal articles of consumption, grain and meat. But on the other hand, there will be an increase of production as soon as the peasant realizes that he is no longer forced to support the idle rich by his toil. New tracts of land will be cleared, new and improved machines set a-going. Quote, never was the land so energetically cultivated as in 1792, when the peasant had taken back from the landlord the soil which he had coveted so long, end quote. Michelet tells us, speaking of the Great Revolution. Before long, intensive cultures would be within the reach of all. Improved machinery, chemical manures, and all such matters would be common property. But everything tends to indicate that at the outset there would be a falling off in agricultural products, in France as elsewhere. In any case, it would be wisest to count upon such a falling off of contributions from the provinces as well as from abroad. And how is this falling off to be made good? Why, in heaven's name, by setting to work ourselves. No need to rack our brains for far-fetched panaceas when the remedy lies close at hand. The large towns must undertake to till the soil like the country districts. We must return to what biology calls, quote, the integration of functions. After the division of labor, the taking up of it as a whole, this is the course followed throughout nature. Besides, philosophy apart, the force of circumstances would bring about this result. Let Paris see that at the end of 8 months it will be running short of bread, and Paris will set to work to grow wheat. What about land? It will not be wanting, for it is round the great towns, and round Paris especially, that the parks and pleasure grounds of the landed gentry are to be found. These thousands of acres only await the skilled labor of the husbandman to surround Paris with fields infinitely more fertile and productive than the steppes of southern Russia, where the soil is dried up by the sun. Nor will labor be lacking. To what should the 2 million citizens of Paris turn their attention when they would be no longer catering for the luxurious fads and amusements of Russian princes, Romanian grandees, and wives of Berlin financiers? With all the mechanical inventions of the century, with all the intelligence and technical skill of the worker accustomed to deal with complicated machinery, with inventors, chemists, professors of bounty, practical botanists like the market gardeners of Genevieve, with all the plant that they could use for multiplying and improving machinery, and finally with the organizing spirit of the Parisian people, their pluck and energy. With all these at its command, the agriculture of the anarchist commune of Paris would be a very different thing from the rude husbandry of the Ardennes. Steam, electricity, the heat of the sun, and the breath of the wind will ere long be pressed into service. The steam harrow and the steam plow will quickly do the rough work of preparation, and the soil, thus cleaned and enriched, will only need the intelligent care of man, and of woman even more than man, to be clothed with luxuriant vegetation, not once, but 3 or 4 times in a year. Thus, learning the art of horticulture from experts, and trying experiments in different methods on small patches of soil reserved for the purpose, vying with each other to obtain the best returns, finding in physical exercise without exhaustion or overwork the health and strength which so often flags in cities. Men, women, and children will gladly turn to the labor of the fields when it is no longer a slavish drudgery, but has become pleasure, a festival, a renewal of health and joy. There are no barren lands. The earth is worth what man is worth. That is the last word of modern agriculture. Ask of the earth, and she will give you bread, provided that you ask aright. A district, though it were as small as the departments of the Seine and the Seine-et-Oise, and with so great a city as Paris to feed, would be practically sufficient to grow upon it all the food supplies which otherwise might fail to reach it. The combination of agriculture and industry, the husbandman and the mechanic in the same individual, this is what anarchist communism will inevitably lead us to, if it starts fair with expropriation. Let the revolution only get so far, and famine is not the enemy it will have to fear. No, the danger which will menace it lies in timidity, prejudice, and half measures. The danger is where Danton saw it when he cried to France, "Dare, dare, and yet again dare. The bold thought first, and the bold deed will not fail to follow." Boom.
Mic drop.
It's so interesting because a lot of this is not necessarily as relevant given how much of it is like you can just farm anywhere, farm everywhere, farm every piece of land in the world. Which is maybe not what we want to do with climate change and the state of agricultural
But like,
stuff.
okay, so like one thing I was thinking, okay, I fucked up, so now I don't have to care. One thing I was thinking about, and also, yes, you nailed it, Juliet.
Yes, we're
Is
sorry. I'll just explain. We are attempting to make as much money as possible so that we can implement proper social policies and not die
at the same
in
time.
Fable 3.
It's
We're
weird how
trying to
if you
both
choose one or the other.
yeah, they're trying to force you to choose one or the other. But if you do mini games such as the pie making mini game, you can make enough money that you don't need to worry about that. So we're doing that and also reading the Conquest of Bread while we do it. Claire,
What
do you want to
better
say?
way? Okay, so one thing I was thinking about, I watched a vid. I know there's like a lot of videos on like the history of suburbs, but I was watching one of them,
Yes.
and at the very end, it goes into like the idea of like the reclamation of suburbia as
Mm-hmm.
um like tearing down your fences and like constructing communities, because suburbia is about like isolation and
Yes.
individualism and whatnot.
Yes.
And like thinking about that, like tearing down your fences and building like essentially like a park slash garden for everyone to have access to. When I hear like grow crops everywhere, this is what comes to mind. It's like you don't have to do mass agricultural all the time, or mass agriculture all the time, if all of your agriculture is abundant everywhere. Like you only need to
Right.
do small scale agriculture. And I was specifically thinking about um like after watching this also, I was like, why is it that like I would never want to be a farmer, but if someone was like, would you like to just tend this like garden with like 20 trees and like a handful of plants, I'd be like, yeah, like I can
Mm-hmm.
just make a living, or not even make a living, but like, if I didn't need to get paid and whatnot, to live, it's like, that's just what I could do. I'd be like, that sounds so peaceful and lovely.
Mm.
Yes. I would love to do that. And if I can't do it that day, then maybe there's other people who can. And anyways, like, uh, I love plants, but like farming is a different vibe than
Yes.
community growing, which is what most likely food in a destructured system might look like. Anyways, that was one of my thoughts. How about
Yeah.
you?
I feel similarly. I mean, I there is, I think, something to the idea of the natural impulse to create for the community. which is why community gardens, I think, exist, because it's exciting and
Yeah.
enjoyable to make stuff grow that can be eaten and used by people. I mean, people have gardens in their backyards. I have herbs growing out on my porch. Like,
I have herbs right
these things
behind
are
me.
fun.
It's
Right,
great. I'm growing basil and it's like, oh my god, I can I can make homemade pesto just
right.
because I put some water on some leaves for like a month.
And like physically, there's a limited amount I can do in terms of gardening.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who can do it and who I think would be happy to participate in it, right? I mean,
Mhm.
again, it cannot be stressed enough that the purpose of work under capitalism is not to contribute to the human good. And so
Mhm.
if hypothetically it were to contribute to the human good, there would be a lot of different jobs.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
and so it would become possible. It would become possible to allow for those things. Um I guess the thing that I'll say about this section is like, yes, we have to think about updated methods because, especially where we are, stewardship of the land is not necessarily ours to decide.
Mhm.
It should go back to the indigenous people. And also, we know that agricultural practices that in Kropotkin's time would have been totally chill are like actually super bad for the earth and the soil.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also still true that we have enough. We have enough. Scarcity, the scarcity mindset is not real. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah. All right. Should I start out chapter 6?
What is chapter 6?
Dwellings.
Dwellings. Oh shit, this is exciting. At one point when it feels right, I want to shout out a specific video on library economies.
All right, when we take a break, when I have to take a break, maybe you can do
Yeah.
that. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Chapter 6, Dwellings, Section 1. Those who have closely watched the growth of certain ideas among the workers must have noticed that on one momentous question, the housing of the people namely, a definite conclusion is being imperceptibly arrived at. It is a known fact that in the large towns of France, and in many of the smaller ones also, the workers are coming gradually to the conclusion that dwelling houses are in no sense the property of those whom the state recognizes as their owners. This idea has evolved naturally in the minds of the people, and nothing will ever convince them again that the rights of property ought to extend to houses. The house. Sorry. Uh,
Uh-huh. Are
I
you
want to
getting
think like.
flustered?
I wish it was true, Kapatkin. I wish. Um, the
Everyone thinks
house.
this way, Kropotkin. You're so right.
Uh, the house was not built by its owner. It was erected, decorated, and furnished by innumerable workers in the timber yard, the brick field, and the workshop, toiling for dear life at a minimum wage. The money spent by the owner was not the product of his own toil. It was amassed, like all other riches, by paying the workers two-thirds or only a half of what was their due. Moreover, and it is here that the enormity of the whole proceeding becomes most glaring, the house owes its actual value to the profit which the owner can make out of it. Now, this profit results from the fact that his house is built in a town possessing bridges, quays, and fine public buildings, and affording to its inhabitants 1,000 comforts and conveniences unknown to villages. A town well paved, lighted with gas, in regular communication with other towns, and itself a center of industry, commerce, science, and art. A town which the work of 20 or 30 generations has gone to render habitable, healthy, and beautiful. A house in certain parts of Paris may be valued at thousands of pounds sterling, not because thousands of pounds worth of labor have been expended on that particular house, but because it is in Paris. Because for centuries, workmen, artists, thinkers, and men of learning and letters have contributed to make Paris what it is today, a center of industry, commerce, politics, art, and science. Because Paris has a past, because, thanks to literature, the names of its streets are household words in foreign countries as well as at home, because it is the fruit of 18 centuries of toil, the work of 50 generations of the whole French nation. Who then can appropriate to himself the tiniest plot of ground or the meanest building without committing a flagrant injustice? Who then has the right to sell to any bidder the smallest portion of the common heritage? On that point, as we have said, the workers are agreed. The idea of free dwellings showed its existence very plainly during the siege of Paris, when the cry was for an abatement pure and simple of the terms demanded by the landlords. It appeared again during the Commune of 1871, when the Paris workmen expected the communal council to decide boldly on the abolition of rent. And when the new revolution comes, it will be the first question with which the poor will concern themselves. Whether in times of revolution or in time of peace, the worker must be housed somehow or other. He must have some sort of roof over his head. But however tumbled down and squalid your dwelling may be, there's always a landlord who can evict you. True, during the revolution, he cannot find bailiffs and police sergeants to throw your rags and chattels into the street. But who knows what the new government will do tomorrow? Who can say that it will not call in the aid of force again and set the police pack upon you to hound you out of your hovels? We have seen the Commune proclaim the remission of rents due up to the 1st of April only. After that, rent has to be paid, though Paris was in a state of chaos and industry at a standstill, so that the revolutionist has absolutely nothing to depend on but his allowance of 15 pence a day. Now the worker must be made to see clearly that in refusing to pay rent to a landlord or owner, he's not simply profiting by the disorganization of authority. He must understand that the abolition of rent is a recognized principle, sanctioned, so to speak, by popular assent, that to be housed rent-free is a right proclaimed aloud by the people. Are we going to wait till this measure, which is in harmony with every honest man's sense of justice, is taken up by the few socialists scattered among the middle-class elements, of which the provisionary government will be composed? We should have to wait long, till the return of reaction, in fact. This is why refusing uniforms and badges, those outward signs of authority and servitude, and remaining people among the people, the earnest revolutionists will work side by side with the masses, that the abolition of rent, the expropriation of houses, may become an accomplished fact. They will prepare the ground and encourage ideas to grow in this direction, and when the fruit of their labors is ripe, the people will proceed to expropriate the houses without giving heed to the theories which will certainly be thrust in their way. Theories about paying compensation to landlords and finding first the necessary funds. On the day that the expropriation of houses takes place, on that day, the exploited workers will have realized that the new times have come, that labor will no longer have to bear the yoke of the rich and powerful, that equality has been so openly proclaimed that this revolution is a real fact and not a theatrical make-believe like so many others preceding it. This
Something to that.
Yeah, this section maybe more than any other is the one that I fully want to just read out, but with the names and dates changed. Like I just replace every mention of Paris with Vancouver. Replace the talk about the
15 pence
remission of
with,
rents with like eviction moratorium due to the pandemic. Like it's the same. Landlords is the same.
Or like 15 pence a day versus what is it? It's like, what is the hourly rate now? It's
is it
raised again?
Still 15 an hour here, or is it 18 now?
I don't remember. But yeah, it's not enough, and that's basically IMO equivalent to 15 pence. Pay them more, and then also no money.
Yeah. The by the way, the referring to the remission of rents due up to the 1st of April is the decree of the 30th March. By this decree, rents due up to the terms of October 1870 and January and April 1871 were annulled. I'm fuming at the fact that they just canceled rents sometimes in the past in cases of crisis. They didn't cancel rents during the pandemic. They just did an eviction moratorium.
They paused rent for what? 2 months?
Did they?
Oh no, they made it illegal to evict if they didn't pay rent for like what? A year maybe?
I think it was around a year.
But then you had to like back pay.
Well, and also then you have an eviction on your record,
Right. Yeah.
which like imagine explaining to Kropotkin the concept of a credit score and watch a man's house explode, watch a man's head explode.
uh,
He'd be so mad. He'd be fuming. Also, explain to him that people still like the part that gets me about this section um is like nothing will ever convince the people again that the rights of property ought to extend to houses. Bro, I wish you were right. I wish you were right.
yeah.
Uh but in fact they will be convinced,
Fuck,
you know?
I will. Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna shout out both videos because
Yeah, I'm probably gonna have to go in like a minute or
a
two,
minute.
but I
Okay.
don't know exactly when.
I should like find actual. I will find actual names when you have to go. I'll take a quick break
Yeah, yeah,
from
yeah, yeah.
making pies and put those in the description. But I'll save this for when you're gone and
Yeah.
I'm
I
talking
just,
about these things.
yeah,
What are your thoughts?
this is really just like the thing where I read this and I'm like, I wish it was different. I wish it was different. I wish, Kropotkin, I wish it was, I'm so sorry. Listen, I have some beefs with you for sure, dude. We got some issues. I'm sorry it's not better. I'm sorry that if you were to exist today, you would still feel much the same.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kropotkins, but we have not gotten better. I'd like to
uh,
personally apologize to him.
uh-huh.
There was something in the previous chapter,
Uh-huh.
like in the food section, that I don't remember the context, but the specific words that I'm like remembering, were something along the lines of like more advanced in imperial structures or something. Can you remind me the
Yeah, it was
context of that?
yeah, it so Kropotkin uses some language to denote how certain groups of people are traditionally viewed, but just frames it as like that's that there's a certain level of civilization which everyone should ascribe to. Um
But he
it's
specifically says it in a way where it's like those who are most advanced under imperialism, or
he
like
says he doesn't say imperialism, he says industrial.
oh okay, right, industrial, which is why my brain went to imperial,
Right.
because of how industrial comes about. Um, but
I'll like show the quote. I'm not gonna speak it out because it has some. I don't think that it is framed particularly well, and I don't think it's
okay.
particularly effective. But I am highlighting it here if you want to look at it, Claire. Um,
I gotta watch the pies. I'm sorry.
that's fine.
I'm fully
I'm
focused
about
on
to
pies.
take
Okay,
my
I
break.
see.
I think I'll
Um,
be back in like a couple
right.
minutes.
Okay, cool.
All right,
Uh,
back in a few.
oh, I see. I see. So when Brianna was reading this earlier, Brianna read it as the so-called inferior races, and I thought that was full on what Kropotkin said, and I was gonna be like, oh, hey, he's like he's like making a critique on the idea of like race, that he's not, unfortunately. But the reason that this stood out to me, was like I feel like Kropotkin was saying those who are more advanced in industrialism and framing it as a good thing, and as again, any Brianna's not here, so anyone in the chat, or if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but um like it felt like he was framing it as a good thing, which is interesting to think about, like uh the literal idea of like being more along the road of industrialism, like in using the literal term of advanced, but like not necessarily conceptualizing that as a good thing, because in order to undo um uh industrialism and imperialism, you will have to do like more, like the more you have changed, fucked up my pie. The more you have like changed the literal landscape, like the more you have like put in effort to change like roads, I'm just thinking about, um the more work you're going to have to do to move away from that, or you're going to confine yourself into a corner of like you're going to have to use this infrastructure um to move towards a uh, a better world. And so that like confines like your options, things uh like fuel efficient cars are like a quote unquote good thing because our infrastructure is car based, um versus and I should really just link the video at this point, and I will. As you know what, fuck my pies, I'm finding the video. um claire said Claire said fuck the pies, we're no longer in pie territory. So I want to share two videos. One of them, don't you hate when you're logged into the wrong YouTube account? Because everyone here has. So the first video I want to share, I feel like applies to um, a lot of cities, not just American cities, but it is framed um, as American cities, and so it's called uh, "The USA Will Never Build Walkable Cities," and I'll put this in the chat, and then I'll put this title, and it's by Frank Laundry on YouTube. And so basically, I'll focus on my pies again. Um, this video goes into like the concept of like what does it mean for a city to be walkable, um, and this is the video where like it goes into um the idea of um like reclaiming suburbia, but because like we have essentially I don't think pigeonholed is the I think no, pigeonhole is the wrong. We've backed ourselves into a corner of like um because suburbia was built, like that's no longer becoming favorable. Like the wealthy are now flocking cities, which is why we're seeing like so much influx in gentrification, like cities across the board. Like uh the and by cities I mean like cities that would be considered more advanced in industrialism um are being flocked to because they are like walkable. And the video does go, it touches on the idea of uh like city infrastructure still being like ableist, and like we're the idea of like curb cuts is still like new, relatively speaking, at all. um so like we have to basically, and I think curb cuts are a great example of like we had sidewalks instead of just flat surfaces to walk on. But if you had just flat surfaces to walk on from the beginning, you wouldn't need curb cuts. So like because we like prioritize cars as an infrastructure, we now have to like back up because we fucked up from like an inclusion standpoint. Um and we kind of have to do like a thing that's not as good, but like because we've um gone down this road so far, it's pretty much almost impossible to like, not impossible. It's extremely, extremely difficult to like back out of that. And so he does go into like the idea of like um sometimes cities will just close down their streets, and you can like walk on them. This happens, I mean, this has happened in Vancouver a lot. Um, and like I've seen it on other cities too. Uh, and it's great. Like the idea of just being able to like walk around is fantastic. But returning to a thought I had earlier, um, this is becoming desirable. This is becoming desirable um, for like rich people. And so everyone, and when I say, I mean like anyone who could afford to live in suburbia and up, I guess. So anyone who could like own a home or like afford a home, um, is now kind of like moving to the city because the like ideal quote unquote is like walkability. And so what this is doing is as prices go up, prices go up because they can, essentially. That is like all it takes. Prices can go up because there is a market with people who will pay more. And because people are willing to pay more, the prices will go up. And so this is like one of the stages of gentrification. Um, and it means like those who like can't pay get pushed out of like neighborhoods that they have lived in their whole life. Um, Highly recommend this video. Does a very good job. Is it's also entertaining. I love you love us you love to do skits. Welcome back, Brianna.
Hello, I'm back.
We've got Brianna with the ASMR. Can you do eating takeout ASMR? Please don't. Please
No,
don't.
I'm not gonna do eating takeout ASMR. I'm gonna mute whenever there's sound being done.
uh
I see that you've posted a link to a video. I'm excited to watch that later.
Nice. That's only
Um,
one of the videos. I didn't even like get to my other video. I was full on
oh,
ranting.
keep going then. I'm gonna eat
I
if
don't
you got
Oh
more
yeah.
material.
Oh fuck. You let me talk, I will talk. Yeah, I'll fill some space. So okay, what was I saying? I wish I had a memory, but all of my attention is on pies. Because we're doing really good. So I guess just because I've lost my train of thought, pie check is we have gotten 500,000 so far. We are at 3.7 million. Okay, so what was I talking about? I was talking about how rich people, and by rich people I mean everyone, um, who was able to afford land in what would be considered suburbia and up, is flocking to the cities because um, walkability, because cities are more walkable than the suburbs. To live in the suburbs, you need a car. Like the infrastructure is built to be isolating. It's built to like go long distances. And to go long distances in our current infrastructure, you like you could have trains, sure, but you don't. You have cars. So uh this is no longer like as desirable as the concept of walkability. And so this is why we're getting and why Vancouver definitely has this, but like the because it's framed in the US, the example city is New York. Um but you know, this is not a unique problem to New York. We get like these huge skyscrapers with penthouses in them that cost, at least in New York, and literally like there's a part in the video where he shows another video of someone doing a tour in one of those penthouses, and the tour is like, what does a $200 million condo look like or something? And like, I don't even know if it was two. I feel like it was even more, but it was like, this isn't even the most expensive one. Like, and because there's these people who just have this money, like the market essentially like goes, "Oh, people are willing to pay this much money." So it doesn't actually matter what the value of a place is, because there's like the video does a better job of explaining the differences in like um I don't remember what the names of the values even were, but like basically it's inflated so far up that it's silly. Um
Are we talking about 432 Park Avenue?
uh is this a specific Vancouver building?
No, it's a New York one.
Oh, yeah, probably. That sounds kind of familiar. Yeah, there's like three skyscrapers that the video references. Um Maybe it's just two, but there's three very obvious ones in the video.
Yeah, I
J-
I also saw a video about this. I think it may have been the
yeah,
same one. 432 Park Avenue is the toothpick, basically. It's the like
the
super thin,
toothpick.
super tall one.
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
and it like sways in the wind and stuff. It's
Oh
awful.
my God.
It
What?
has like holes in it for wind reasons. Like the actual reason I know about 432 Park Avenue is there's a person on TikTok who has talked about 432 Park Avenue a bunch,
Okay.
because it's her most hated building. And for good reason. Let's be clear.
Yeah, this
Fuck
video.
432 Park Avenue. I am firmly against 432 Park Avenue.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, it's also not even on Park Avenue. Fun fact. Um,
Wow, they named it wrong.
yeah. Um, Another thing that I think I will maybe go into more detail on later. But there's a video that talks about that I saw that talks about strodes.
Can you define
Which is
strode?
sorry.
What is a strode?
As soon as I explain what it is, you're gonna be like, I've seen that. Um,
Okay, okay.
so a road
Oh no.
is so a road, right?
Uh-huh.
Is which one is it? I think the road is the one for driving, right? A road is one
Okay.
where you drive on it far distances from place to place, right?
Uh-huh.
It's
Yeah.
your like
Highways.
um yeah. Streets have stuff on them, right?
They
They
sure
have
do.
shops and places to eat, and like
Yeah.
often you can walk around them. Um that maybe there's like, yeah, there's markets and stuff like that. A
So a
strode
strode. Yeah, all right.
is when you have a road, but it has stuff around it, but
Uh-huh.
the stuff is really spread out. So you can only really access it
By a car.
by car. Cars are going
Yeah.
at road speeds.
Yeah.
And if you try to like accident amounts are really high there.
Yeah.
Um, if I explain this, do you know what this is? Have you seen this?
Yeah. Oh, like I grew up in I grew up in a town in Mission, which like has a highway running through it.
Right. If you look at like, for example, South Burnaby kind of area where
Yeah.
there's a lot of industrial stuff, that's just all stroads.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's pretty bad. The video actually like goes into that when it's talking about like you know in order to like because it's like in New York, the example is like, oh, like you have a building that has like a bodega underneath and then like houses or like apartments above and then maybe like a corner that has, I don't know, like another like thing that a person might need. But like this is walkable. Like the idea of walkability is because it's so close. But like in the uh uh suburbia, you literally need a car just to get groceries, just to get food, just to get tools, just to get access to like anything. So yeah.
Yeah.
He he definitely talks about the idea of I don't know if he uses the word strode. Maybe he does, but when you said strode, I thought you were saying STRODE. Um
No. No.
I was like, I don't even know what to imagine. Stroad. Got it.
Yeah. I'm gonna
Yeah.
see if I can find this video and also link it at some point. Um, should so we have about 10 minutes before we need to take like a proper break. Do we want to try and let me look at how long this next section is and see if we would have time. We'd probably get through this, but we wouldn't be able to discuss it. Do we want to maybe take a bit of an early break and then come back?
Yeah, we can take a bit of an early break. That sounds good to me.
Okay, unless you have more to discuss right now.
Um, I really just want to say that I enjoyed this video. It's 90 minutes. This person is funny. I've watched multiple other videos about the history of suburbia, but I still learned things from this video. And if you have 90 minutes to waste at work because fuck your boss, you should watch this video at work.
Hell yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Thanks for your patience. See you in a bit.
All right, be right back. Hello. Oh fuck. I tried to like be sneaky and like get us into the stream with pie at fully at 10 because I was doing a little bit of pie making off stream just like while we
You
were
gotta
on
be taking
break.
breaks. You gotta be taking breaks, Claire.
I look, literally all I'm doing here is mindlessly like pressing buttons at this point. Like it is truly a head empty act at this point. And so it's almost the equivalent of like stimming to me now. Like I'm just sitting here stimming essentially, pressing some buttons. And so in order to keep my hands busy while we were on break, I just made some more pies. I could play with one of my stim toys, but I don't know. It
Mm-hmm.
something allegory for like work when you want to, not when you have to.
No, that makes sense to me. That makes sense. Yeah, seems reasonable. Well, I'll let you take a break from talking and make your pies, and I'll
Like
continue on with section 2 of chapter 6, dwellings.
dwellings.
If the idea of expropriation be adopted by the people, it will be carried into effect in spite of all the quote unquote insurmountable obstacles with which we are menaced. Of course, the good folk in new uniforms, seated in the official armchairs of the Hotel de Ville, will be sure to busy themselves in heaping up obstacles. They will talk of giving compensation to the landlords, of preparing statistics, and drawing up long reports. Yes, they would be capable of drawing up reports long enough to outlast the hopes of the people, who, after waiting and starving in enforced idleness and seeing nothing come of all these official researches, would lose heart and faith in the revolution and abandon the field to the reactionaries. The new bureaucracy would end by making expropriation hateful in the eyes of all. Here, indeed, is a rock which might shipwreck our hopes. But if the people turn a deaf ear to the specious arguments used to dazzle them, and realize that new life needs new conditions, and if they undertake the task themselves, then expropriation can be effected without any great difficulty. But how? How can it be done, you ask us? We shall try to reply to this question, but with a reservation. We have no intention of tracing out the plans of expropriation in their smallest details. We know beforehand that all that any man or group of men could suggest today will be far surpassed by the reality when it comes. Men will accomplish greater things and accomplish them better and by simpler methods than those dictated to him beforehand. Thus, we are content to indicate the manner by which expropriation might be accomplished without the intervention of government. We do not propose to go out of our way to answer those who declare that the thing is impossible. We confine ourselves to replying that we are not the upholders of any particular method of organization. We are only concerned to demonstrate that expropriation could be effected by popular initiative and could not be effected by any other means whatsoever. It seems very likely that, as soon as expropriation is fairly stated, groups of volunteers will spring up in every district, street, and block of houses, and undertake to inquire into the number of flats and houses which are empty, and of those which are overcrowded, the unwholesome slums, and the houses which are too spacious for their occupants, and might well be used to house those who are stifled in swarming tenements. In a few days, these volunteers would have drawn up complete lists for the street and the district of all the flats, tenements, family mansions, and villa residences, all the rooms and suites of rooms, healthy and unhealthy, small and large, foyted dens, and homes of luxury. Freely communicating with each other, these volunteers would soon have their statistics complete. False statistics can be manufactured in boardrooms and offices, but true and exact statistics must begin with the individual and mount up from the simple to the complex. Then, without waiting for anyone's leave, those citizens will probably go and find their comrades who are living in miserable garrets and hovels and will say to them simply, "It is a real revolution this time, comrades, and no mistake about it. Come to such a place this evening, all the neighborhood will be there. We are going to redistribute the dwelling houses. If you are tired of your slum garret, come and choose one of the flats of 5 rooms that are to be disposed of. And when you have once moved in, you shall stay, never fear. The people are up in arms, and he who would venture to evict you will have to answer to them." But everyone will want a fine house or a spacious flat, we are told. No, you are mistaken. It is not the people's way to clamor for the moon. On the contrary, every time we have seen them set about repairing a wrong, we have been struck by the good sense and instinct for justice which animates the masses. Have we ever known them demand the impossible? Have we ever seen the people of Paris fighting among themselves while waiting for their rations of bread or firewood during the 2 sieges? The patience and resignation which prevailed among them was constantly held up to admiration by the foreign press correspondents, and yet these patient waiters knew full well that the last comers would have to pass the day without food or fire. We do not deny that there are plenty of egotistic instincts in isolated individuals in our societies. We are quite aware of it. But we contend that the very way to revive and nourish these instincts would be to confine such questions as the housing of the people to any board or committee, in fact, to the tender mercies of officialism in any shape or form. Then, indeed, all the evil passions spring up, and it becomes a case of who is the most influential person on the board. The least inequality causes wranglings and recriminations. If the smallest advantage is given to any one, a tremendous hue and cry is raised, and not without reason. But if the people themselves, organized by streets, districts, and parishes, undertake to move the inhabitants of the slums into the half-empty dwellings of the middle classes, the trifling inconveniences, the little inequalities will be easily tided over. Rarely has appeal been made to the good instincts of the masses, only as a last resort to save the sinking ship in times of revolution. But never has such an appeal been made in vain. The heroism, the self-devotion of the toiler has never failed to respond to it. And thus it will be in the coming revolution. But when all is said and done, some inequalities, some inevitable injustices will remain. There are individuals in our society whom no great crisis can lift out of the deep ruts of egoism in which they are sunk. The question, however, is not whether there will be injustices or no, but rather how to limit the number of them. Now all history, all the experiences of the human race, and all social psychology unite in showing that the best and fairest way is to trust the decision to those whom it concerns most nearly. It is they alone who can consider and allow for the 101 details which would necessarily be overlooked in any merely official redistribution.
Was that the whole section?
Yeah,
Very
that's
short.
part 2 of that's section 2 of
Yeah.
chapter 6. Yes.
I feel like there is a lot more want for more now than there was 130 years ago. Like I feel like the desire for like that. Okay, maybe that's not true, but like I think about like there's a lot of people with that egotistical mindset. IMO, at least maybe in Vancouver.
Yeah, for sure. I do think, he says himself, this is not the plan. This is a plan.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And he's a little bit optimistic, I think. I think he's a little bit optimistic.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit optimistic is my worry. Like, as I'm listening to him, I'm like, yeah, like we should just like step one, get people into homes. Then like go from there. Like it's the most basic like, oh no, someone got a home that is bigger than another home. Yeah, but like they have a home. Like what is the quote? It's like to each what they need, from each what they can give or something. And
Yeah,
it's like
totally.
people need different things. And like in my opinion, like I have talked about this, I don't, maybe on the podcast, maybe just privately, but like my ideal home is an apartment. It's just the fact that like it's an apartment where a bunch of people I know all live in the same building, because then you can do community together in a short distance. And really what that is like getting to know your neighbors is what I'm saying. But like that, because uh housing, even like apartments, are somewhat like individualized, like there aren't a lot of buildings with like a community area in them. Like there isn't like a communal kitchen or a communal thing that people can rent to do with their neighbors. But I've seen it in this area. Like I've literally like one time, um, fuck, I fucked up my pie. One time I saw like an invitation, and it was just like, this building 3 blocks down invites all neighbors in this area to come do a barbecue. And it's like, yeah, just you're invited because you're in the area. That's the whole thing. It's just get to know the other people in the area. And like I guess my whole point is like not everyone wants the biggest space. There's a very
Yeah, I
roundabout
mean,
way of saying that.
totally. Just one sec.
Yeah. Oh, I can keep going. Um yeah,
No, I
anyway.
want to talk. Just give me a sec.
Okay. No, it's my show now. Sorry, Brianna. I'm the only one who talks. I'm gonna actually just mute Brianna.
um, I am a person who, ideally, I would like a house, but
Hmm.
part of that isn't. Part of that is due to the fact that like I would like having my own. I would like having a slightly larger space, I guess. But
Hmm.
a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm tired of paying rent. I'm tired
Yeah.
of not having control over what color I get to paint my walls. I'm
Yeah.
tired of not having control over what my house looks like, about what I'm allowed to do with it. Um, Everything is so strictly controlled. Um, it's never yours. It's never a place that is actually you can feel safe in, because you know that one day someone could just take it from you.
Hmm.
You know, and not for the purposes of other people, for the purposes of profit.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, which is what a lot of people will say is the folly of communism. It's like, oh, someone could just take your
Right.
house from you. You have no freedom. That's already the situation. Like,
Yeah.
I, that's already the choice.
And the idea
We're
of like
all
people are less likely to do that if people don't need to do that.
right. Well, yeah, exactly. And also something that I would say about like, you know, this also is this guy says a house with five, here's a place with 5 rooms. That's his like
Mhm.
base structure, an apartment with 5 rooms in it.
5 rooms?
That sounds
Holy
great. That's one
shit.
more room than I have. That's great. I mean, even
Think
even
are we
if you
counting
consider,
bathrooms as rooms?
I think to me, what I'm counting as 5 rooms is a living room, a kitchen, a bathroom, a bedroom, and
Okay.
another room. Um,
Okay.
Even
Yeah,
by
I
that
think I
most strict definition of what 5 rooms is, I
think
have
I have
4.
4. Yeah. I think mine's 4. I'm just thinking
No,
I have.
you have. If you separate out your kitchen and living room, because remember at
Oh,
this time they
it's
wouldn't
the
have had
same
open
room.
concept.
Oh, sure. Sure, sure,
They wouldn't
sure.
have had open concept at this time.
But I mean, I don't consider them separate rooms. Like if we're
Right.
reading it as a modern
Right.
thing.
Imagine it as a bigger kitchen.
Oh
Um,
God. If I could switch the sizes of my kitchen and my living room, I would. Like, this is the thing. For me, the best part of a place is the kitchen. And like, this is not true for everyone. People want
mhm.
different things. People might not even want a kitchen. Like, people
Couldn't be
might want
me,
to
but go
like
off. Yeah.
but like, yeah, some people just like don't want to cook. Some people want to cook
Yeah.
for others. And like, I would love to cook for others. Give me the biggest kitchen in the apartment and like I don't need to be the only one cooking in there. I just want to work in the biggest kitchen. Um and like make like big vats of food for like multiple people. Um anyways, yeah, so houses don't even have to like look uniform is the thing.
Mhm.
Um
Yeah.
if we're
Right, there's no
reimagining
profit
things.
motive. Why not make it look weird? Which of course is the thing of art also. Um,
Weird is a good like I agree with weird and also make it like towards the person's needs
yeah, totally.
in a like a community based structure at least where maybe like when I think about like library economies later and I'll post a video when I talk about that, but like you don't need to have everything at your place necessarily.
Yeah.
Um you don't need to own a car. You don't need to own like gardening tools. Um you only need to like have things when you need them.
Mhm.
And you can share things. So uh I'll say
And
more
also,
later.
it's okay to want to have things of your own.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, maybe not everything has to be individualist in nature, but like,
This is my
it's fine if you
diary. You can't write in my diary.
right. But even a house, right? Like, you don't necessarily. What if you got the choice? What if you got the choice of how you wanted to live, who you wanted to live with? Like, right now, at least in Vancouver, you can't really live alone. Like, it's really difficult to live alone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think many people will be happier that way. I mean, this is a thing that people pointed out about abusive living situations. It's easier to leave an abusive living situation if you don't have to have someone who will live with you because you can't afford rent on your own.
Yeah.
You know?
And then you have people
Yeah.
like me where it's like I could never live by myself.
No, me neither. Me neither. Yeah, 100%.
Fucking up every pie right now.
Well, that's fine.
I'm
I'm gonna
not into
read
the
more
pie.
so
Yeah,
you
okay. You
can
should read more.
you can pie.
Let me let me I can't fit pie into focus.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep reading. Oh,
All right.
you reading is my inspiration. Got it. Nailed it.
Boo, boo, boo.
Right.
Section 3. Moreover, it is by no means necessary to make straight away an absolutely equal redistribution of all the dwellings. There will no doubt be some inconveniences at first, but matters will soon be righted in a society which has adopted expropriation. When the masons and carpenters and all who are concerned in house building know that their daily bread is secured to them, they will ask nothing better than to work at their old trade a few hours a day. They will adapt the fine houses which absorb the time of a whole staff of servants, and in a few months homes will have sprung up infinitely healthier and more conveniently arranged than those of today. And to those who are not yet comfortably housed, the anarchist commune will be able to say, "Patience, comrades! Palaces fairer and finer than any the capitalists built for themselves will spring from the ground of our enfranchised city. They will belong to those who have most need of them. The anarchist commune does not build with an eye to revenues. These monuments erected to its citizens, products of the collective spirit, will serve as models to all humanity. They will be yours. If the people of the revolution expropriate the houses and proclaim free lodgings, the communalizing of houses and the right of each family to a decent dwelling, then the revolution will have assumed a communistic character from the first, and started on a course from which it will be by no means easy to turn it. It will have struck a fatal blow at individual property. For the expropriation of dwellings contains in germ the whole social revolution. On the manner of its accomplishment depends the character of all that follows. Either we shall start on a good road leading straight to anarchist communism, or we shall remain sticking in the mud of despotic individualism. It is easy to see the numerous objections, theoretical on the one hand, practical on the other, with which we are sure to be met. As it will be a question of maintaining iniquity at any price, our opponents will of course protest, quote, in the name of justice. Is it not a crying shame, they will exclaim, that the people of Paris should take possession of all these fine houses, while the peasants in the country have only tumble-down huts to live in? But do not let us make a mistake. These enthusiasts for justice forget, by a lapse of memory to which they are subject, the quote-unquote crying shame which they themselves are tacitly defending. They forget that in this same city, the worker, with his wife and children, suffocates in a noisome garret, while from his window he sees the rich man's palace. They forget that whole generations perish in crowded slums, starving for air and sunlight, and that to redress this injustice ought to be the first task of the revolution. Do not let these disingenuous protests hold us back. We know that any inequality which may exist between town and country in the early days of the revolution will be transitory and of a nature to right itself from day to day, for the village will not fail to improve its dwelling as soon as the peasant has ceased to be the beast of burden of the farmer, the merchant, the moneylender, and the state. In order to avoid an accidental and transitory inequality, shall we stay our hand from righting an ancient wrong? These so-called practical objections are not very formidable either. We are bidden to consider the hard case of some poor fellow who, by dint of privation, has contrived to buy a house just large enough to hold his family. And we are not going to deprive him of his hard-earned happiness, to turn him into the street. Certainly not. If his house is only just large enough for his family, by all means let him stay there. Let him work in his little garden, too. Our boys will not hinder him. Nay, they will lend him a helping hand if need be. But suppose he lets lodgings, suppose he has empty rooms in his house, then the people will make the lodger understand that he need not pay his former landlord any more rent. Stay where you are, but rent free. No more duns and collectors. Socialism has abolished all that. Or again, suppose that the landlord has a score of rooms all to himself, and some poor woman lives nearby with 5 children in one room. In that case, the people would see whether, with some alterations, these empty rooms cannot be converted into a suitable home for the poor woman and her 5 children. Would not that be more just and fair than to leave the mother and her 5 little ones languishing in a garret, while Sir Gorgeous Midas sat at his ease in an empty mansion? Besides, good Sir Gorgeous would probably hasten to do it of his own accord. His wife will be delighted to be freed from half her big, unwieldy house, when there is no longer a staff of servants to keep it in order. So you are going to turn everything upside down, say the defenders of law and order. There will be no end to the evictions and removals. Would it not be better to start fresh by turning everybody out of doors and redistributing the houses by lot? Thus our critics, but we are firmly persuaded that if no government interferes in the matter, if all the changes are entrusted to those free groups which have sprung up to undertake the work, the evictions and removals will be less numerous than those which take place in 1 year under the present system, owing to the rapacity of landlords. In the first place, there are in all large towns almost enough empty houses and flats to lodge all the inhabitants of the slums. As to the palaces and suites of fine apartments, many working people would not live in them if they could. One could not, quote-unquote, keep up such houses without a large staff of servants. Their occupants would soon find themselves forced to seek less luxurious dwellings. The fine ladies would find that palaces were not well adapted to self-help in the kitchen. Gradually, people would shake down. There'd be no need to conduct dives to a garret at the bayonet's point, or install Lazarus in Dives' palace by the help of an armed escort. People would shake down amicably into the available dwellings with the least possible friction and disturbance. Have we not the example of the village communes redistributing fields and distributing the owners of the allotments so little that one can only praise the intelligence and good sense of the methods they employ? Fewer fields change hands under the management of the Russian commune than where personal property holds sway, and is forever carrying its quarrels into courts of law. And are we to believe that the inhabitants of a great European city would be less intelligent and less capable of organization than Russian or Hindu peasants? They might be. They may in fact might be. Um, Moreover, we must not blink the fact that every revolution means a certain disturbance to everyday life, and those who expect this tremendous lift out of the old grooves to be accomplished without so much as jarring the dishes on their dinner table will find themselves mistaken. It is true that governments can change without disturbing worthy citizens at dinner, but the crimes of society towards those who have nourished and supported it are not to be redressed by any such political sleight of parties. Undoubtedly, there will be a disturbance, but must not be of pure destruction. It must be minimized. And again, it is impossible to lay too much stress on this maxim. It will be by addressing ourselves to the interested parties, and not to boards and committees, that we shall best succeed in reducing the sum of inconveniences for everybody. The people commit blunder on blunder when they have to choose by ballot some harebrained candidate who solicits the honor of representing them, and takes upon himself to know all, to do all, and to organize all. But when they take upon themselves to organize what they know, what touches them directly, they do it better than all the quote-unquote talking shops put together. Is not the Paris Commune an instant in point? And the great Dockers strike? Have we not constant evidence of this fact in every village commune? And that's chapter 6.
Oh wow. I made it through. What was the comment you made? I missed. You said they might be.
I was being a little bit rude. I don't think that intelligence is a real concept, but it was a comment basically saying, are we to believe that are we to believe that the inhabitants of a great European city would be less intelligent and less capable of organization than Russian or Hindu peasants?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And I mostly am pointing out that European exceptionalism is a fake fucking thing that does not exist and is not real.
I heard the contrapositive, contrapositive of that sentence, and I was like, wait a minute, I've misunderstood, I've misheard or something.
No, it's he is saying Europeans are smart, and I'm saying, what I said was
like inherently, are they?
Inherently, are they? I think intelligence is a fake concept, but capability of organization, I actually think, and we've seen based on worldwide movements that in fact many places other than Europe are much better at organizing. I mean, we can all talk about, for those who are watching live, we all know that England right now is not particularly capable of organization. And I don't mean labor organization, I mean having a government. And not in a cool anarchist way.
Thing. Yeah, they can't even do capitalist organizing right.
Right. They're so, and it's not to say that it's necessarily better in other places in the world, but like, honestly, compared to Britain, it seems like it's a lot better in other places of the world.
They really said, I can set a low bar, hold my beer.
Yeah, they really said, we're English. No one's gonna come for us. Yeah, it's... Anyway, European exceptionalism is fake, but it's true that everywhere around the world, it is capable to build better, more equitable dwellings. Even today, I think this is still true, even though, times have changed. We know it's an existing fact that there are more empty houses than there are homeless people, for example. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that that's it. You just put all the homeless people in the empty houses. There's a lot of other considerations to be had. But also sometimes it is that.
Yeah, like this is what sometimes I was saying. Like, that's step one. It's not the end.
Right.
But that's step one. That's like the lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah. And let's be clear, we'll know who's in the empty houses. We'll know which houses are empty because people know which houses in their neighborhoods are empty.
Yeah. Like, I think someone just the other day was like, oh yeah, there's like an empty house, like 3 blocks down. It's like, I didn't even ask like how they knew, but like they just knew. And you can just tell, like, Um, at least uh where they're building like sky rises out here, just look at the balconies. Like the balconies are like you'll have balconies that have plants and chairs, um, and then you'll have a balcony that looks like it's never been opened.
Right,
And it's
exactly.
like big balconies. These aren't like you can't do anything. I'm talking like balconies as big as my frickin' living room.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's not the only way to tell, but what I'm saying is there's a disproportionate number of empty balconies. There's no way.
I mean, yeah. It feels like we already know, as it turns out in Vancouver, because
Yeah.
empty houses are such a big fucking issue here. We
Hmm.
actually already have records. I know that he's like, no statistics, no records.
Uh-huh.
We just do it ourselves. But hey, we have a much bigger population than they did back then. Sometimes we need records and statistics. But guess what? We have them. We have all of them. We've taken them for so long. We have empty houses. We have empty houses taxes. We have foreign buyers taxes. And yes, are all of, and some of, yes, many of those are not effectively or ethically,
Applied.
arranged. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that I think the foreign buyers tax was as much a way to be xenophobic towards Chinese people as it was a reckoning with the amount of empty houses we have. In fact, probably more that, because it didn't really do much about the empty houses. Um, but the records exist. And if you were to, say, use a mix of record keeping that already exists with on the ground action of like people going to houses investigating whether they're empty or not, right? That's
Hmm.
a pretty good fucking start.
We also live in a society that is more surveillance heavy now, just like as a baseline.
Right, which that's bad.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Yeah. But as a
uh,
result, we know more like we as
yes,
in the general populace has access to more information also.
totally.
One thing, and I think you touched on this slightly. One thing that that like concerned me, um, was Kropotkin essentially saying, um, it's up to like the community to determine how much space someone needs, which like on the surface to me is like fine and dandy, but like then thinking about like inequalities of like race and gender and how people treat the needs of like racialized and gender minority people like differently. um I feel like not every community, but probably a portion of communities would, say, well, would find justifications to basically be racist or homophobic about like how much space um someone gets, uh if it's just up to like, I don't know, like
Yeah.
there's no one to one. I feel like it's a hard issue, but that is like one like worry that comes to my
Right.
mind, because you can't just
In
be like every person deserves 1,000 square feet, because that's not true. Some people will literally need more. Some people will need less.
right.
Um, but like, how do you determine someone's need? Is it up to them? Okay, well, you might have your bad faith actor who goes, no, I need this mansion all to myself. And maybe there's one person, maybe there's one person in the whole world, maybe there's more, maybe there's one person in the whole world where there's an actual justification for that. But I can't think of it right now, and I have a hard time believing it actually exists. But like, at what point do you go and like, maybe now I'm being pedantic, and like the counter argument is just use logic, but this is then where my concern of like biases come in.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, Sorry, one sec.
Yeah.
I think this is where my general thing of read Kropotkin and then read something else comes in.
Yeah.
Because you need a decolonial analysis, right? The thing is, you can't just have everyone do it because because land back. Because here, land back. Because indigenous people should be the one determining that. And obviously, they're not going to want to determine every small little aspect of that. And there is wiggle room to work with that. But obviously, indigenous people should be leading who gets what land, right? Here. And also, just in general, talking about, like, people have differing needs. Yes. This is why you need a, like, anti-oppressive revolution, right? A revolution that looks at patriarchy and colonialism and all these other factors that Kropotkin is not really talking about. He's talking a little bit about colonialism very obliquely and with colonialist views. But there's all these other factors at play. That said, what I will say, in regards to the guy who says he needs a mansion, which
I couldn't think of. I really
no,
wanted
I know
to
what
just
you
go
mean.
for the extreme. Yeah,
I know what you mean.
I invented a guy.
Right, but I also am fascinated by what Kropotkin says about people being like, not wanting a house so big that it requires servants to take care of it when they don't have servants anymore. And I think, to me, the rise of suburban housing has maybe dented my optimism at that, because it turns out people like a nice big house, even if they can't take care of it, because it's a status symbol. But also, when if it's not a status symbol anymore, like, people will consider their needs. People downsize all the time, due to circumstances, right?
Yeah.
A lot of things can start to work themselves out because the existence of large houses is a consequence of capitalism. Large, expansive, massive houses.
Yeah.
And it might still be the case that, again, like he says, there might be some difference in size. There might be some where it's a larger amount and some, larger space, and some where it's a smaller space. Sure. But without the position which comes with having a house, a big house, without knowing that an apartment means that someone else owns it, I don't know. It's kind of easier.
I believe the people who want bigger houses are, as the kids say, called size queens. And you can use that.
Don't. You should not. Don't. I would not recommend, for example, Googling that with those search terms. I would not. That's not what that means.
Indoor size queens.
Backdoor size queens.
Oh no. Oh.
For your porches,
I
think with that I should start chapter 7.
Maybe, yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Do you want to know what chapter 7's title is, Claire?
What's it called?
Clothing.
Oh, I'm so scared to hear Kropotkin's opinions on clothing.
This is maybe the chapter that I'm the most worried about.
I am so scared right now.
Food, I had some questions, sir, but I'm with you. I'm feeling it.
Housing, I was more in line even, I think.
Yeah, housing, I was like, yeah, this makes total sense. Fuck yeah, we have to update some things, but I'm down with it. Clothing? What the fuck does Kropotkin...
No fear. Kropotkin's opinions on clothing's one fear.
What's that fucking... I know fucking... Fuck Kanye West, obviously, in every way, but there's that one quote where he's like, Kropotkin writes a chapter on clothing. Listen, I like some of the Kropotkin lyrics or some of the Kropotkin lines.
What?
What the fuck does he know about clothing? So Kanye quote of him talking about Lady Gaga and cameras. Anyway,
I see.
fuck Kanye West. Anyway, all right, let's go. Chapter 7, Clothing, Section 1. When the houses have become the common heritage of the citizens, and when each man has his daily supply of food, another forward step will have to be taken. The question of clothing will of course demand consideration next, and again the only possible solution will be to take possession, in the name of the people, of all the shops and warehouses where clothing is sold or stored, and to throw open the doors to all, so that each can take what he needs. The communalization of clothing, the right of each to take what he needs from the communal stores, or to have it made for him at the tailors and outfitters, is a necessary corollary of the communalization of houses and food. Obviously, we shall not need for that to despoil all citizens of their coats, to put all the garments in a heap and draw lots for them, as our critics, with equal wit and ingenuity, suggest. Let him who has a coat keep it still. Nay, if he have 10 coats, it is highly improbable that anyone will want to deprive him of them. For most folk will prefer a new coat to one that has already graced the shoulders of some fat bourgeois, and there will never be enough new garments and to spare without having recourse to second-hand wardrobes. If we were to take an inventory of all the clothes and stuff for clothing accumulated in the shops and stores of the large towns, we should find probably that in Paris, Lyon, Bordeaux, and Marseille, there was enough to enable the commune to offer garments to all the citizens of both sexes. And if all were not suited at once, the communal outfitters would soon make good these shortcomings. We know how rapidly our great tailoring and dressmaking establishments work nowadays, provided as they are with machinery specially adapted for production on a large scale. But everyone will want a sable-lined coat or a velvet gown, exclaim our adversaries. Frankly, we do not believe it. Every woman does not dote on velvet, nor does every man dream of sable linings. Even now, if we were to ask each woman to choose her gown, we should find some to prefer a simple practical garment to all the fantastic trimmings that fashionable world affects. Tastes change with the times, and the fashion in vogue at the time of the revolution will certainly make for simplicity. Societies, like individuals, have their hours of cowardice, but also their heroic moments, and though the society of today cuts a very poor figure sunk in the pursuit of narrow personal interests and second-rate ideas, it wears a different air when great crises come. It has its moments of greatness and enthusiasm. Men of generous nature will gain the power which today is in the hands of jobbers. Self-devotion will spring up, and noble deeds beget their like. Even the egotists will be ashamed of hanging back, and will be drawn in spite of themselves to admire, if not imitate, the generous and brave. The great revolution of 1793 abounds in examples of this kind, and it is ever during such times of spiritual revival, as natural to societies as to individuals, that the springtide of enthusiasm sweeps humanity onwards. We do not wish to exaggerate the part played by such noble passions, nor is it upon them that we would found our ideal of society. But we are not asking too much if we expect their aid in tiding over the first and most difficult moments. We cannot hope that our daily life will be continuously inspired by such exalted enthusiasms, but we may expect their aid at the first, and that is all we need. It is just to wash the earth clean, to sweep away the shards and refuse accumulated by centuries of slavery and oppression, that the new anarchist society will have need of this wave of brotherly love. Later on, it can exist without appealing to the spirit of self-sacrifice, because it will have eliminated oppression and thus created a new world instinct with all the feelings of solidarity. Besides, should the character of the revolution be such as we have sketched here, the free initiative of individuals would find an extensive field of action in thwarting the efforts of the egotists. Groups would spring up in every street and quarter to undertake the charge of the clothing. They would make inventories of all that the city possessed and would find out approximately what were the resources at their disposal. It is more than likely that in the matter of clothing, the citizens would adopt the same principles as in the matter of provisions. That is to say, they would offer freely from the common store everything which was to be found in abundance, and dole out whatever was limited in quantity. Not being able to offer to each man a sable-lined coat, and to every woman a velvet gown, society would probably distinguish between the superfluous and the necessary, and provisionally, at least, class sable and velvet among the superfluities of life, ready to let time prove whether what is a luxury today may not become common to all tomorrow. While the necessary clothing will be guaranteed to each inhabitant of the anarchist city, it will be left to private activity to provide for the sick and feeble those things provisionally considered as luxuries, and to procure for the less robust such special articles as would not enter consumption of ordinary citizens. But, it may be urged, this gray uniformity means the end of everything beautiful in life and art. Certainly not, we reply, and we still base our opinion on what already exists. We propose to show presently how an anarchist society could satisfy the most artistic tastes of its citizens without allowing them to amass the fortunes of millions. That's the whole chapter. That's a short chapter.
Oh, okay. Cool.
All
Well, you
right.
answered one of my questions, which was, do you think we're going to get through clothes tonight?
We are, in fact, getting through clothes. We are through clothes.
All right. What are your thoughts?
Fashion and clothing is so different now than it was then. It's almost very little of what Kropotkin says here. I hate to say it. I hate to say it to you, Kropotkin. Very little of what you have to say here is necessarily still the fact of the day today. Yeah. As soon as he was like, throw open all the doors of all the clothing sellers and just let people take what they need, the alarm bells in my head began to ring unbelievably. I mean, maybe a type of that could work. I do think thrift shops are maybe our best example. Thrift shops are a good example that, in general, people kind of take what they want generally, but there's also exploitation in it, right? Of like people taking from thrift shops, and changing the garments, all that sorts of stuff, and then reselling it. Which that exploitation wouldn't necessarily exist in the future, but it's still worth saying that, like, no, it doesn't quite work like that. I'm sorry to say. That said, he does make some points. What was the specific thing that I thought that made total sense? I mean, obviously, we have enough shit. We have enough clothing. We actually need less clothing. There is enough clothing. No one needs to deprive someone of their coats. We can have that. And also, like, it's true that not everyone will want a sable-lined coat or a velvet gown, because people generally have different tastes. And also, velvet gowns are hard to walk in sometimes, in a lot of cases. As it turns out, it's way easier to walk in more practical wear. You need a mix of both. And he's right in saying that there will be enough that luxury can become common. Which, in fairness, is already the case. And maybe less the case, but, like, there's no reason that after the revolution, people can't still have nice clothing that they like. It also helps when people know how to sew a little bit themselves. Mm-hmm. Which I imagine would become a more common skill if you're only having to work for a few hours a day.
I think there's like a specific I have like a lot of thoughts on this chapter.
Tell me.
But there's like a specific aspect of fashion and clothing that Kropotkin is just missing, which is people use fashion to signal like interest in an event or a person. People use it as like, you know, when you go on a date and you want someone to like you, so you like dress a certain way, or you're going to a gay party, so you dress a certain way, or I don't know, you're like, there's not only like clothing for circumstances, but like those circumstances hold weight to people. And so like this is where I'm gonna share the video. So IMO, So I'm sharing in the chat a video called "We Need a Library Economy" by Andrewism. I think clothing is a great example of the benefits of a library economy. Like, I don't know if housing works for it. I don't know if food works for it. But when we're talking about clothing, like you're talking about, like we have enough clothing. People will probably want clothing that isn't like, well, some people might want clothing that isn't full of patches. But like if you have a library economy of clothing, then you have people who like take the clothes back, like clean it or like fix it up or modify it even, and then put it back into like distribution. And you're saying like with thrift stores, people like do this already, it's just exploited. What if they're like, I literally have a box of clothes that I want to get rid of, but I don't want to like, I don't want to just dump it at like a thrift store because I know it's just gonna like get like exploited. I want to like make sure people can get it for free. But you know, I'm not seeing a whole whack of people right now. So there it sits. I would love if I could just return it to the library, have them categorize it, and when somebody needs clothes, just go get it. Just go get it. Oh, you're going on a date? Oh, okay. Yeah, go get some clothes that's different. That's like for the date. Oh, you're going like to like, and also the aspect of like fashion and clothing. Like, I think you were touching on this, Brianna, of like, I'm thinking about the idea of like makeup, but then also like other, I don't know how to explain it. Extremities? I don't think that's the word I want. But like think about gluing little pieces of stars onto your face to look,
Cosmetics.
yeah, cosmetics, thank you. Like putting little like stars onto your face to look cute. Like, and I mean maybe that's just my opinion. I like to put a star on my face if I want to look cute because I like a star on my face. But like, how do you account for that? Um like I guess like IMO, a library economy helps with that.
Can you explain what a
What a library,
library economy is?
yeah, so like you know how a library works where you go and get a book and you take the book out when you need it, and then when you no longer need it, you return it because you're done with it. What if that's how things worked? And so if you watch the video, it also has some like fun skits. And so like obviously like there's issues with the current method of how like libraries work. There's like legitimate critiques of how libraries like function. A lot of those are because of capitalism, I feel like I'm thinking about like due dates and like um or like fines for due dates specifically. Um Anyways, what if there was like a clothing library where like the clothing librarians were people who wanted to like patch stuff up or add patches if like you want clothing that has patches or remove patches or like treat these things as like usable, because like in the video the number one tenet of like libraries is things are meant to be used, not just like viewed. um and like make things as accessible as possible to as many people as possible, which is why there's like so much effort, you know, given the lack of funding into libraries. I feel like many of them try to make efforts of like um making it easier to find what you're looking for. Like that is a librarian's function.
Right. On the one
Um,
hand,
mhm.
I wanna complicate your idea.
Okay, cool.
Um, because on the one hand, I think in a lot of cases it can work. A library, I think a library economy generally is a great idea. I have
Mhm.
concerns about how it would work with clothing.
Mhm.
First off, is I guess I don't know the exact details. I don't know if there's a due date structure or if it's a like keep
That's
it until you're done with
minutia.
it.
Yeah.
It's not minutia though. It's quite because here's my
You're
thing.
right. Yeah, it
The
should be considered.
the thing that clothing has is also people have emotional attachments to clothing.
Uh-huh.
Um and I don't think that's something that's going to go away after the revolution, right?
I
Is
agree.
like you can't eventually, right? You a clothing may outlive its usefulness. You give it back, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's true in some cases. But also, a coat can be passed down generation to generation, right?
Oh,
Things can have
100%.
meaning and value. Of like my parent gave me this, you know.
Yeah.
Cosmetics also super duper don't work in a library economy. You can't just give makeup back.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's unsanitary.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
The
but
makeup comment was separate from the. But sorry, keep going.
right, fair. But I just mean that like I think there's still an equitable way to distribute this stuff, and also I think you have to allow for a level of some ownership or at least
Mm-hmm.
possession, extended long-term possession of clothing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Of
It,
like I never want to get rid of this, you know.
yeah. In my opinion, like a an ethical library economy does account for that. Because like, but like, even when things account for that, like, eventually they will return. Like, I guess the idea is like
Yeah.
things will return if there is a place to return them to where you can then go and get new things. Like if it was like, "Oh, um I like this raincoat, but honestly, I don't love it and now it's summer. Maybe I'll just return it and like get a different raincoat next fall or next
Right.
and maybe you get like a raincoat that you really love, and it's like, you know what? This is my raincoat, and maybe I'll pass it on, or maybe I won't. And like once I'm gone, it's gonna go back. But like you said, we have an abundance of clothing. We could do
Right.
that. Things can live
We could.
generationally. Yeah.
Yeah. I
But
think we
things
need to
will
take a
end up.
break.
Yeah, we do.
We need to take a break, but when we come back, I think there's more to say on this, but also we may just want to move on to ways and means because we could talk about the logistics of clothing
Oh my god.
redistribution for literal
That's the
hours.
show now. That's the show now.
That's the whole show. That's what you get when the trans girls read Kropotkin.
Kropotkin was wrong about clothing. It's our turn now. Here's how you do clothing. All right, we'll talk more when we're back. Be
Okay.
right back. Hello.
Welcome back.
We're gonna talk about clothing for another hour.
No, we're gonna do chapter 8, ways and means. It's not too long, so be here for a little bit and then probably
Did
be
you
done for the night.
want to say anything quickly about like the idea of library economies? Because you did say before we went on break.
Oh yeah, the I think the last point that I wanted to make, or the last like question I guess I have for how would a library economy work with this? Gotcha. Now we can never do a revolution again because I'm not sold on the library economy for clothing.
Yeah.
Is what do you do about non-normative interests in clothing? What do you do about countercultural movements in clothing? Is your, you know, how do you ensure that your libraries, especially rural clothing libraries, much like rural actual libraries, don't just have the most common and normative pieces of clothing that people want? You know, how do you make sure it's not all, how do you have a space mapped out for stuff? And also, you know, and part of maybe the solution to this is you allow people to edit and change the clothing, but can you do that if it's a library? If it's a library, you can't deface a book. Can you stick spikes onto your boots if you're dealing clothing, which is a thing that punks have done for decades. You know,
Yeah.
it's like stick spikes on shit. stick studs on shit. Like, this is a very common clothing changing and
Yeah.
adapting and stuff.
This is a great question. If I was in charge of clothing libraries, my solution to this would be that clothing libraries should I think you're right. Allow modifications with like education on like how to do this. Like people, like I assume the people know how to do this because at a clothing library, if they are making the modifications. So like having people who will absolutely work with you to not only um encourage this, but like provide you the resources and like education should you want it. And then also another thought is um if you don't want to do it yourself, like having the ability to work with someone more closely on a specific thing, aka tailors, like Kropotkin says, like being an integral part to the concept of a clothing library specifically. I think if I was in charge of clothing libraries, that would be my answer to that. Obviously, no one would be in charge of clothing libraries; they would be owned by the community. Um,
No,
or
it's me.
not.
I'm in charge of the clothing library,
Ah,
and I
fuck!
dictate who
God
gets
damn it,
what
Brianna!
based on my own personal tastes of what I think looks best on people.
I can't
I
believe
am
it.
deciding. I'm now doing authoritarian. It's now authoritarian fashion communism, in which everyone gets good quality clothing, but I decide what you wear based on your vibes.
People are
And
starving, but they
um,
look fucking great.
who said people were starving? No, I only run the fashion part of this. The food,
Oh,
everyone
I
can have
see.
whatever
I
food they want.
see. I
No,
see.
let me be clear. I am only an authoritarian about fashion
I
in this
see.
in this scenario. Um in every other way, which I think also might
Uh,
be Nerner. Like, bringing it back to Fable, like, I feel like Nerner is the type to be like, but wouldn't it be nice if you maybe like wore this instead?
oh
I think
no.
Nerder is aesthetically minded, in a
Oh
way,
yeah, 100%.
and
Yeah.
maybe not quite
Not.
authoritarian about it, but
I mean,
certainly.
she is
Hmm.
royalty.
Right. That's true. Um.
So kind of authoritarian.
Mhm.
Just by trade.
Mhm. Mhm.
Authoritarian by trade is maybe the weirdest framing.
I think that's called a dictator, Claire.
Or a CEO, IMO.
Claire, they're the same thing. Um.
Yeah. Potato,
Yeah.
potato.
Boards of directors are just the same. Okay, here's I have a
Hot
hot take before we
take. All
get. Okay,
right.
here's my hot take. Here's my hot take. Okay, the structure of
Uh-huh.
European, like 18th century societies, in which there was a monarch who made the decisions, but was always to
Mm.
larger or smaller degrees, depending on the time and the place,
Yeah.
was accountable to the parliament of elected lords, who only
Uh-huh.
lords could vote for.
Uh-huh.
Um, that sort of model of a constitutional monarchy is, to me, functionally indistinguishable from a present day corporation.
Yeah, because you got your CEO and then you got your board of investors.
Yeah, your board of investors, board of directors, like, that's the same as the parliaments of that era. If you want to think about parliaments in that era, I think that's kind of the sitch. And occasionally, maybe a member of the board rises up and um, takes over the and ousts the CEO and says, actually, you are still here in title, but
Uh-huh.
actually the board of directors runs the company now. Um, and sometimes that man's name is Robert Walpole, and he can do it because he convinces the CEO, or king in this case, George III, to sign some papers that the king doesn't understand because they imported him from Germany because of their weird bloodline shit.
Huh.
Which is how we got modern day democracy, by the way, just in case you were curious.
I would even go one step further to back up your hot take to say, uh, their incentive is the same thing.
Yes. Authoritarians is the same. All right. Ways and Means. Chapter 8. If a society, a city, or a territory were to guard the necessaries of life to its inhabitants, and we shall see how the conception of the necessaries of life can be so extended as to include luxuries, it would be compelled to take possession of what is absolutely needed for production. That is to say, land, machinery, factories, means of transport, etc. Capital in the hands of private owners was to be expropriated and returned to the community. The great harm done by bourgeois society, as we have already mentioned, is not only that capitalists seize a large share of the profits of each industrial and commercial enterprise, thus enabling them to live without working, but that all production has taken a wrong direction, as it is not carried on with a view to securing well-being to all. For this reason, we condemn it. Moreover, it is impossible to carry on mercantile production in everybody's interest. To wish it would be to expect the capitalist to go beyond his province and to fulfill duties that he cannot fulfill without ceasing to be what he is, a private manufacturer seeking his own enrichment. Capitalist organization, based on the personal interest of each individual trader, has given all that could be expected of it to society. It has increased the productive force of work. The capitalist, profiting by the revolution effected in industry by steam, by the sudden development of chemistry and machinery, and by other inventions of our century, has endeavored in his own interest to increase the yield of work, and in a great measure he has succeeded. But to attribute other duties to him would be unreasonable. For example, to expect that he should use the superior yield of work in the interest of society as a whole would be to ask philanthropy and charity of him, and a capitalist enterprise cannot be based on charity. It now remains for society to extend this greater productivity, which is limited to certain industries, and to apply it to the general good. But it is evident that to guarantee well-being to all, society must take back possession of all means of production. Economists, as is their wont, will not fail to remind us of the comparative well-being of a certain category of young, robust workmen, skilled in certain special branches of industry. It is always this minority that is pointed out to us with pride. But is this well-being, which is the exclusive right of a few, secure? Tomorrow, maybe, negligence, improvidence, or the greed of their employers will deprive these privileged men of their work, and they will pay for the period of comfort they have enjoyed with months and years of poverty or destitution. How many important industries, woven goods, iron, sugar, etc., without mentioning short-lived trades, have we not seen to decline or come to a standstill, alternatively on account of speculations or in consequence of natural displacement of work, and lastly from the effects of competition due to capitalists themselves? If the chief weaving and mechanical industries had to pass through such a crisis as they have passed through in 1886, we hardly need mention the small trades, all of which come periodically to a standstill. What, too, shall we say to the price which is paid for the relative well-being of certain categories of workmen? Unfortunately, it is paid for by the ruin of agriculture, the shameless exploitation of the peasants, the misery of the masses. In comparison with the feeble minority of workers who enjoy a certain comfort, how many millions of human beings live from hand to mouth, without a secure wage, ready to go wherever they are wanted? How many peasants work 14 hours a day for a poor pittance? Capital depopulates the country, exploits the colonies, and the countries where industries are but little developed, dooms the immense majority of workmen to remain without technical education, to remain mediocre even in their own trade. This is not merely accidental, it is a necessity of the capitalist system. In order to remunerate certain classes of workmen, peasants must become the beasts of burden of society. The country must be deserted for the town. Small trades must agglomerate in the foul suburbs of large cities and manufacture 1,000 things of little value for next to nothing, so as to bring the goods of the greater industries within reach of buyers with small salaries. That bad cloth may sell, garments are made for ill-paid workers by tailors who are satisfied with a starvation wage. Eastern lands in a backward state are exploited by the West in order that, under the capitalist system, workers in a few privileged industries may obtain certain limited comforts of life. The evil of the present system is therefore not that the surplus value of production goes to the capitalists, as Rodbertus and Marx said, thus narrowing the socialist conception and the general view of the capitalist system. The surplus value itself is but a consequence of deeper causes. The evil lies in the possibility of a surplus value existing, instead of a simple surplus not consumed by each generation. For that a surplus value should exist means that men, women, and children are compelled by hunger to sell their labor for a small part of what this labor produces, and above all of what their labor is capable of producing. But this evil will last as long as the instruments of production belong to a few. As long as men are compelled to pay tribute to property holders for the right of cultivating land or putting machinery into action, and the property holder is free to produce what bids fair to bring him in the greatest profits rather than the greatest amount of useful commodities, well-being can only be temporarily guaranteed to a very few, and is only to be bought by the poverty of a section of society. It is not sufficient to distribute the profits realized by a trade in equal parts, if at the same time thousands of other workers are exploited. It is the case of producing the greatest amount of goods necessary to the well-being of all with the least possible waste of human energy. This cannot be the aim of a private owner, and this is why society as a whole, taking this view of production as its ideal, will be compelled to expropriate all that enhances well-being while producing wealth. It will have to take possession of land, factories, mines, means of communication, etc., and besides, it will have to study what products will promote general well-being, as well as the ways and means of production. Fucking A.
I feel like I had a
I
thought, but it's gone.
I'll just say, the sentence here, which by the way, part of it is all caps. There's occasionally
He
points in this
pressed
book where
cap
everything is
lock.
all caps.
What?
It's very rare. It's very
That's
rare.
extremely funny.
It's like when he has his main points. I think that they just didn't have bolding in that time. You know?
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, they fully didn't. So the part that's capitalized here is it is a case of producing the greatest amount of goods necessary to the well-being of all with the least possible waste of human energy.
Least
That's
possible waste. That hits me weird.
I don't know. To me it makes sense. I think there's more to it. I think there's a second sentence or a second part to this with the least possible waste of human energy or and while being sustainable. Like I think that's the other part here, which is while being sustainable, while not ruining the planet, all that sort of thing. But what this is basically saying is when it says the least possible waste of human energy, it says you don't want humans to have to expend their energy on meaningless things that only produce wealth.
Right. Yeah. I think I could hear a CEO saying this to extract labor warning bells were going off in my head. And just completely ignore the context in which it comes from.
Right.
Do you see that?
Yeah.
Like, am I making
I
this
see
up?
it.
You see it?
I think it's helpful.
That's why it hits me weird.
That immediately before he says, immediately after, this cannot be the aim of a private owner. This is why society as a whole, taking this view of production as its ideal, will be compelled to expropriate all that enhances well-being while producing wealth. It cuts well-being while producing wealth. This is like such a small example of this, and it is a very luxury-focused example. So bear with me here. In general, a thing that's fascinating if you look into the history of flight is first class was not a creation.
Hmm.
Economy was a creation. Um,
Hmm.
every flight used to have the standards that are now exclusively those that first class enjoys. Maybe not all of them. There's certainly superfluous things that have been added,
The
but
standards were like level on each plane, is what you're saying.
the standards where everyone had the same experience.
Right.
And it was closer to the first class experience than to the economy experience. Um, you had meals, you had, um, you know, nice seating and stuff like this. And the reason that changed was to, increase profits to allow for more flights to happen because people wanted to fly more and they couldn't make as much of a profit at that point. Doing things that way. And so economy was born because people wanted to fly more. And as it turns out, we should have been flying less.
Hmm.
First of all.
Weird.
um Weirdly, multiple flights in a year is not sustainable. Um and jets in general, jet fuel and stuff. There's all sorts of issues with flying. And I'm not saying bring back the good old days. But what I am seeing is that is a very real and explicit example of when a society takes the view of this view of production as its ideal, the aim of a private owner, um, will be compelled to expropriate all that enhances well-being while producing wealth. It will get rid of everything that makes well-being better to produce wealth. And this is not just in flights. There's a lot of things where like you go back and watch old movies and or like experience, like look into the history of things and you're just like they used to be able to do what? You
Hmm.
could just do what?
Yeah.
You could live like this? Um and certainly it was not true across everyone. There was always an underclass, and especially in the past, almost always that underclass was black and brown and like other marginalized people, often enforced by things like segregation. Um, but this general idea that time has brought about better circumstances, that has brought about more luxury, not true across the board. Certainly not true across the board. Because the interest is not in the well-being of all, it is in wealth generation. And it will get rid of anything that enhances the well-being of all that does not enhance profit or, stupefy resistance.
Hell yeah. I have two thoughts from that. One of
Tell
them is
me.
just a brief. I wish that without being I like allowed to do things whatever we want, I feel like we would so much faster come up with a way to do air travel that was not environmentally destructive, and that would be sick as hell.
Mm-hmm.
Um other thing is like thinking about your idea of like over time we haven't necessarily gained luxury. I was thinking about this story that my father was telling me about he was on the last train car in Canada that um was like a dining car with tablecloths and whatnot, and it used to be that like every train had this car that you would just go to, and it was just a like like you could just have a martini there. And specifically he was talking about this because it's like in the James Bond movies, which he likes. I'm not gonna go. I could talk about that for too long. I'm not going to. But essentially he was saying like because this was like culturally a thing that was like, oh, you just go have a drink on the train or whatever the fuck. At least in his experience, as like a white man. Um, this was like presented as like a normal thing you do when you travel by train. So much so that it makes it into like movies that like just isn't a thing anymore. Um yeah, anyway, so they literally removed the train cars.
Yeah.
It yeah.
Yeah. No one should ever go back and watch the Harry Potter movies, comma, if you did and
Uh-huh.
you looked at their train cars and
Mm,
their
mm, mm.
their train cars and the way their train is set up is as fantastical as the magic because it just doesn't exist.
I thought that was
At the
just
very least, maybe it
European
does in England. Maybe
trains.
there are places in England where it does.
I think that's just like an English thing is that you like I imagine you have to like pay extra money. I almost assume you have to pay like exorbitant money to get like your own um place to like sit down. Um but I'm almost certain those still do exist. Specifically because there's like a movie Enola Holmes on Netflix that is more
Mm,
recent that also has these trains.
I see.
Um
So maybe it's just an English thing.
Maybe it's
Maybe
just an English thing.
maybe a land without a functioning government or people in
Somehow
charge
they
of
can
it.
still do trains better than us.
Goddamn shame. Just shows how little we've invested in our trains. Invest as you
True.
know, more trains, less cars, and more cars in train cars. More. Okay, here's very easy slogan to remember and say:
Mm-hmm.
less cars, more train cars in the trains where you can get a car in the train of your own. Where's your car in the train? So you don't need your own car outside of the train.
I feel like we can condense that a little bit.
I think it's every word is crucial. I think every word is crucial and important. And if you condense it down even a little bit, I think you lose the whole meaning.
All right.
I'm sorry, sometimes theory has to be dense.
Mm,
Me when I'm Foucault. Okay. I'm gonna read section 2.
oh yeah.
Um, all right. How many hours a day will man have to work to produce nourishing food, a comfortable home, and necessary clothing for his family? This question has often preoccupied socialists, and they generally came to the conclusion that 4 or 5 hours a day would suffice, on condition, be it well understood, that all men work. At the end of last century, Benjamin Franklin fixed the limit at 5 hours, and if the need of comfort is greater now, the power of production has augmented too, and far more rapidly. In speaking of agriculture further on, we shall see what the earth can be made to yield to man when he cultivates it scientifically, instead of throwing seed haphazard in a badly plowed soil, as he mostly does today. In the great farms of Western America, some of which cover 30 square miles, but have a poorer soil than the manured soil of civilized countries, only
Uh,
10 to 15 English bushels per English acre are obtained. That is to say, half the yield of European farms or of American farms in eastern states. And nevertheless, thanks to machines which enable 2 men to plow 4 English acres a day, 100 men can produce in a year all that is necessary to deliver the bread of 10,000 people at their homes during a whole year. Thus, it would suffice for a man to work under the same conditions for 30 hours, say 6 half days of 5 hours each, to have bread for a whole year, and to work 30 half days to guarantee the same to a family of 5 people. We shall also prove by results obtained nowadays that if we had recourse to intensive agriculture, less than 6 half days' work could procure bread, meat, vegetables, and even luxurious fruits for a whole family. And again, if we study the costs of workmen's dwellings built in large towns today, we can ascertain that to obtain in a large English city a detached little house, as they are built for workmen, from 1400 to 1800 half days work of 5 hours for be sufficient. As a house of that kind lasts 50 years at least, it follows that 28 to 36 half days work a year would provide well furnished, healthy quarters with all necessary comforts for a family. Whereas when hiring the same apartment from an employer, a workman pays 75 to 100 days work per year. Mark that these figures represent the maximum of what a house costs in England today, being given the defective organization of our societies. In Belgium, workmen's cities have been built far cheaper. Taking everything into consideration, we are justified in affirming that in a well organized society, 30 or 40 half days' work a year will suffice to guarantee a perfectly comfortable home. There now remains clothing, the exact value of which is almost impossible to fix because the profits realized by a swarm of middlemen cannot be estimated. Let us take cloth, for example, and add up all the deductions made by landowners, sheep owners, wool merchants, and all their intermediate agents, then by railway companies, mill owners, weavers, dealers in ready-made clothes, sellers, and commission agents. You will get an idea of what is paid to a whole swarm of capitalists for each article of clothing. That is why it is perfectly impossible to say how many days' work an overcoat that you pay £3 or £4 for in a large London shop represents. What is certain is that with present machinery, they no doubt manage to manufacture an incredible amount of goods. A few examples will suffice. Thus, in the United States, in 751 cotton mills for spinning and weaving, 175,000 men and women produced 2 billion and 33 million yards of cotton goods, besides a great quantity of thread. On the average, more than 12,000 yards of cotton goods alone are obtained by a 300 days work of 9.5 hours each. Say 40 yards of cotton in 10 hours. I'm sweating due to the numbers. Admitting that a family needs 200 yards a year at most, this would be equivalent to 50 hours work, say 10 half days of 5 hours each. And we should have thread besides, that is to say, cotton to sew with and thread to weave cloth with, so as to manufacture woolen stuffs mixed with cotton. As to the results obtained by weaving alone, the official statistics of the United States teach us that in 1870, if workmen worked 13 to 14 hours a day, they made 10,000 yards of white cotton goods in a year. 13 years later, 1886, they wove 30,000 yards by working only 55 hours a week. Even in printed cotton goods they obtained, weaving and printing included, 32,000 yards in 2,670 hours of work a year, say about 12 yards an hour. Thus, to have your 200 yards of white and printed cotton goods, 17 hours work a year would suffice. It is necessary to remark that raw material reaches these factories in about the same state as it comes from the fields, and that the transformations gone through by the piece before it is converted into goods are completed in the course of these 17 hours. But to buy these 200 yards from the tradesman, a well-paid workman must give at the very least 10 to 15 days' work of 10 hours each, say 100 to 150 hours. Find as to the English peasant, he would have to toil for a month or a little more to obtain this luxury. By this example, we can already see that by working 50 half days per year in a well-organized society, we could dress better than the lower middle classes do today. But with all this, we have only required 60 half days' work of 5 hours each to obtain the fruits of the earth, 40 for housing and 50 for clothing, which only makes half a year's work, as the year consists of 300 working days if we deduct holidays. Okay. There remains still 150 half days' work, which could be made use of for other necessaries of life: wine, sugar, coffee, tea, furniture, transport, etc., etc. It is evident that these calculations are only approximative, but they can also be proved in another way. When we take into account how many in the so-called civilized nations produce nothing, how many work at harmful trades, doomed to disappear, and lastly, how many are only useless middlemen, we see that in each nation the number of real producers could be doubled. And if instead of every 10 men, 20 were occupied in producing useful commodities, and if society took the trouble to economize human energy, those 20 people would only have to work 5 hours a day without production decreasing, and it would suffice to reduce the waste of human energy at the service of wealthy families or of those administrators that have one official to every 10 inhabitants, and utilize those forces to augment the productivity of the nation, to limit work to 4 or even to 3 hours, on condition that we should be satisfied with present production. After studying all these facts together, we may arrive then at the following conclusion. Imagine a society comprising a few million inhabitants, engaged in agriculture and a great variety of industries. Paris, for example, with the Department of Seine-et-Oise, Suppose that in this society, all children learn to work with their hands as well as their brains. Admit that all adults, save women, engaged in the education of their children, bind themselves to work 5 hours a day from the age of 20 or 22 to 45 or 50, and that they follow occupations they have chosen and any one branch of human work considered necessary. Such a society could in return guarantee well-being to all its members. That is to say, a more substantial well-being than that enjoyed today by the middle classes. And moreover, each worker belonging to the society would have at his disposal at least 5 hours a day, which he could devote to science, art, and individual needs, which do not come under the category of necessities, but will probably do so later on when man's productivity will have augmented and those objects will no longer appear luxurious or inaccessible. I'm very excited for the next chapter, by the way, which is called The Need for Luxury, which is a
Oh
very exciting
shit.
chapter name. So that'll be fun to start out with next time. There's so many numbers in this section, and so few of them are relevant to life as it is today.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
it's just different. Production is just different today than
It
it was
just
then.
hits different. Yeah.
Um, the two things that make me personally start to
Mm-hmm.
develop flames on the side of my head
I feel like
in
I'm
the language
going
of
in the same
Clue.
direction. Yeah.
There's two particular numbers that I want to point out because there's so many numbers here. The
Good job,
first
by the
number,
way.
thank you. The first number is 5 hours a day. I don't know. I feel like 4 or 3. I think it works. We know already that you're not actually productive after a certain amount of hours. I believe at maximum it's 6. At maximum, you are no longer productive after 6 hours of work. You just aren't. It just there's a plateau in most industries. Not all industries, maybe, but in most. So that's one number I'll point out is I think we could go for 3. I think we could go for 3 hours, but maybe 4, maybe 5. Even so much better than 8. So much better than 8. Unbelievably better. Um, the second thing that I'll say is the part where he estimates that 300 working days is how many are in a year. Given holidays and such makes me think about like, okay, how many weekends are in a year? Is that counting weekends, or did they have more holidays then than we have now? And then I start thinking about other places, even capitalist places, which just straight up have way more holiday time than we do here, and we're in
Mhm.
Canada, so
Yeah.
uh yeah, you know. Um, those are the numbers which made me perk up. Mostly the one about how many hours a day we would have to work, because people have calculated that it would. I believe there is calculation done, and I would have to look for the statistics of whether it's 3 or 4, but I know it's less than 5.
Hmm. I was gonna say, like, one of the things I was thinking about, is I bet that number's even lower. Like, I bet
Yes.
it's like 1.5 hours. Like, if we're talking about like what would people need, what is like the maximum amount of hours that people would need to put into a society such that like that society could sustain the people.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's much lower because like a the work we're doing right now isn't the work we would be doing.
Right.
um and I think the work we would be doing, um like I feel like more, I just don't think it would take as long.
Mm-hmm.
um and also, uh what was the other thing? Oh, we have like automation now. Like we have so
Yes.
much more automation than we did 130 years ago. Like
We
if we're
truly do.
talking 5 hours 130 years ago, there's no way it's like more than half of this estimate.
Yeah.
Another thing I was thinking, the framing at one point is like, what would every person have to work? And it's like every person. And this is where
Right.
I start to go, well, hold on. Are we mandating labor now?
Uh-huh. Right. And the truth is, the trick, again, Kropotkin doesn't know I know this. Not everyone necessarily has to work, and
Yeah,
also work can look different for different people. There
exactly.
is this kind of rugged, throughout Kropotkin, there is this rugged sense that there is a right way to do things,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
There's an objectively
The
best
European
way.
way, clearly, is what
Right, the
he
European
thinks.
way.
Yeah, uh-huh.
There's an objectively best way to do things. Um, and there just isn't. Um, and when you free yourself from that, and when you allow people and create, assuming, what if instead of the middlemen taking a cut for, connecting person to person or selling something or what have you, what if instead the middlemen could organize and help organize workplaces so that things can be done most effectively, um, whilst also meeting everyone's particular needs. Um, what if what if HR wasn't evil? um,
Oh,
but like genuinely, what if, right? Like there's so much possibility in the
yeah.
world of what could be. We are not actually beholden to Kropotkin's particular hangups,
Hmm.
and European hangups in general, because there are actually so many other ways to do things, and we know this because other people around the world have been doing it differently for decades, centuries, millennia, right? Um, you know, there's like a fairly common uh quote I know. What is it called? It's from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Um,
that's what I was trying to quote earlier.
right. And that is a way you can organize a society.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Genuinely.
Yeah.
Like for real, for real.
Uh-huh.
Um, a better world than even Kropotkin can imagine is possible. We
But that's
live
from Kropotkin, isn't it? We read that earlier.
I don't did we believe that? I don't think we read that
Control fine.
here.
Control fine.
I'm gonna search for it. Um,
Maybe you just said it and I thought Kropotkin said it.
I think
But
he
it was
says
in like
something
the
similar.
middle. Okay. It was like in the middle of a chapter. It was like it was like 2 episodes ago.
No, he is not.
He doesn't say
He
it.
does not say that, but he does say. He does talk about. He does say basically this.
Okay.
Of course, we are all, unfortunately, beholden to our own particular biases, and
Yeah.
so we can both say things that are
Uh-huh.
equivalent to that, but also in
Mean different
Kropotkin's case,
things.
he's
Yeah.
European, he's white, he's a man, and this is not to say so no one should listen to him, but it means that he is limited in what he's able to even see his own ideology applied to, right?
Hmm.
Because he still believes in the European concept of objectively best production methods are European production methods, for example.
Hmm.
Um, and like, you know, as it turns out, there's lots of people who aren't beholden to that, who've also written great works, that we can also pull from in reorganizing a society. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
We should read one of those works sometime.
yeah, I think that'd be great. I think if, again, like I said, I think if we had some downtime where we decided we wanted to do some busy work in Mass Effect Andromeda, I would have pushed us to read some anti-colonial works, probably. Assuming we'd
Hmm.
had this thought during Mass Effect Andromeda, this idea. If we had, I think it would have been great to read some good
Yeah.
anti-colonial works. Get the fan on the fanon going while you play your space colonization game.
I just need to say that so far the choices in games and the themes in games has been like colonization or like monarchy organization. Like monarchical organization. Like
Right.
I don't even know if I would call this a revolution. TVH, it was an exiled monarch going
Yeah.
I mean it is a revolution by definition, but it's not the revolution that we think of when
It
we
is
say
it is something
revolution.
akin to, in terms of structure, it's something akin to War of the Roses, which if you don't know anything about War of the Roses,
I don't.
just know that that's what George R. R. Martin wrote Game of Thrones based on.
Oh,
Um, Structurally, it's War of the Roses, but thematically, it's talking about revolution. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
which is
Uh-huh.
kind of silly. Um,
It tries so hard.
It does. It really does. And I admire that there are clearly many voices working on a thing, because like all productions,
Uh-huh.
anytime that there's a thing made, it's made with multiple people, you know? And I'm sure that some of those are more revolutionary or leftist or have other interests or would prefer other things to be the way that this is talked about.
Right. Somebody
Um,
had to be like, what if we did a revolution story?
right.
Like someone had to pitch that at one point.
Someone had to make that kick-ass opening animation.
It's true.
Um, that the start of the game it has. Which again, shout out to that. Um, and then other people made the rest of the game in a capitalist system,
Yeah.
with capitalist bosses who dictate fundamentally at the end of the day what the game is.
Yep. That is the unfortunate truth, ain't it? I'm like stalling because I am one pie away from hitting 2 million for the night. So this
Yeah,
might
yeah, yeah.
be the last pie of the night. Until I fuck up at least. There we are. We're at 5.2 million. We started at 3.2 million. Um
Let's
that
fucking go.
that is 2 million.
Every day we get closer to the revolution, which will just install another monarch. Don't worry about that. It's probably fine. There won't be another counter revolution. We're all good because we're
Yeah,
implementing all the good social policies, which will fix the
right.
problem.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there's like a special ending. I've been wondering like what the speedruns consider the end.
I am desperate to look up once we're done this game. So when we did Mass Effect Andromeda last time, I think we did a bunch of trivia, and we when we
Uh-huh.
ended that game. This one, I just want to know.
You
There's so
wanna
much I want to
yeah.
know. I
Speedruns.
Yeah, I want to know speed runs. We may just have to watch a speed run and talk about the game. That might just be our
Well,
finale thing. We'll see.
we were talking like the speedruns are an hour and a half, aren't they?
They're longer than that, I
Oh,
think,
they're
but
longer than that? Okay.
yeah.
That
But
would be
still,
incredibly funny. But
yeah. I
like what
mean,
does that mean? Right? Like does speedrun I feel like speedrunning this game is basically like fuck the people. It's literally the inverse of what we're doing.
right, because discursively, the path of most efficiency based on the
Yep.
structures created by capitalists and patriarchs is that which goes against the people, which prioritizes the efficiency of wealth production, which prioritizes the power of the monarchs, that cares little about the promises made. That is always the path of most efficiency. It is harder to do good
If you speed
under their
run Fable
structures.
3, you're a fucking colonist. Got him.
I don't know that we're going to get any better than that. So I think we have to end there, having denounced all speedrunners of Fable 3, like categorically as a people. Um,
Yeah.
We have not alienated ourselves.
No.
We have not caused any problems for ourselves going forward.
No.
Everything
No.
is fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
And and next time we will talk about the need for luxury. Is speedrunning a luxury? Who can say? We'll have to ask Kropotkin. I'm sure he'll know all about speedrunning.
Probably. I think so, at least. All right. Good night, folks.
Good night.